This is the Jon McComb Show podcast. Subscribe now on iTunes. Listen to the show live each weekday morning, 5:30 to 10 on News Talk 980 CKNW and through the Radio Player app.
As we watch the inundation that's taking place in Texas on the southern coast, in Houston, in Beaumont, Texas, and east toward Louisiana, people are asking the question of were the United States prepared enough for hurricane and now tropical storm Harvey? Some respond by saying, well, it was a 1-in-1,000-year event, so how can you be prepared for something like that? Others are saying, well, the drainage system around Houston, Texas was built during the Depression in the last century, in the 30s and 40s, and really there hasn't been much done with it since then. So how prepared can you be? And bringing it back home, how prepared is Canada for major weather systems, flooding, other natural disasters? Well, to help us sort through that, we're joined by Glenn McGillivray. He's Managing Director at the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. Glenn, good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, let me just briefly ask you to explain what the Institute is about.
We've been around for 20 years. Actually, this year is our 20th anniversary. We were formed by the Canadian insurance industry to look into natural hazards and natural disasters and figure out ways of lessening the impact on people and property in Canada.
So let's talk about the Houston area for a moment. As I say, 1-in-1,000-year storm. Can anybody be prepared for that?
Well, 50 inches of rain is just absolutely incredible, and I don't think there's a city around that wouldn't have at least some impacts from that. But it's not to say that you shouldn't do anything, and certainly your preamble was right on the money. Their drainage system is Depression era, and the other thing is that area, the Metroplex, has been growing like crazy, and they've been paving over green space and wetlands for a number of years. Development. Now they're paying the price for it.
And so with a drainage system, because they don't really have storm drains per se, they have bayous and they have canals and other things, but that system not prepared to handle anything like this. I guess the question is, do you now turn around and spend however many billions it would take to upgrade that system?
Well, I think they're going to have to make some hard decisions over the next little while, and they're really going to have to look at the big picture there. You know, when we talk about flooding in Canadian cities, we often talk about upgrading infrastructure and little projects here and there. They're going to have to stand back and look at really the big thing, and first of all decide whether they should be rebuilding in certain areas. That's, I think, number one, and then number two, looking at mega projects that will prevent this from happening again. It's a metroplex of 6.5 million people. There's no way they can just kind of let this thing go. They're really going to have to make some tough decisions and invest some really, really big money into making the Houston area more resilient.
Well, you're in the insurance business, or you're part of it, and you see what's going on with the weather all around the world, but specifically in North America. And I'm just wondering, they're calling this a 1-in-1,000-year event, but we can't be sure that that's the case. There are certainly a number of people who are saying, look, the coastlines all around North America, indeed around the world, are in some danger because of rising sea levels and just what seems to be the increasing power of these storms. Does that mean that our coastal areas are going to become less inhabited just as a buffer?
I think so. We're looking at sea level rise due to climate change. We're looking at storm surge from tropical storms and hurricanes, and erosion, coastal erosion from both of those things. And I think in some cases retreat is going to have to be the way to go. And if retreat isn't the way to go, then we're going to have to put masses of amounts of money into protecting these coastal cities all around the world.
Do you think there's no direct evidence, but do you think what's happened in Texas and into Louisiana is this part of the cycle of climate change?
I think there's no question that climate change plays some role in this. I do not subscribe to the theory that climate change caused this. That's not the way climate change works. Mm-hmm. Saying that climate change caused this is like saying that paprika caused the stew. It's an ingredient. It's a multiplier. It made it worse, no doubt, but it certainly didn't cause this event.
What can Canada do? Houston, Texas is a much different situation than cities in Canada. But what can Canada learn from what's happened in the Gulf Coast?
Well, I think we can learn a few things. The importance of green space and wetland is very important in mitigating flood, heavy rainfall-related flood. Watching what we build, how we build it, and where we build it is very key. So land use planning and building code, the two go hand in hand and are very, very important to ensuring that we're ready for these types of things. And we have to watch our urban sprawl. Cities like Toronto, they're densifying. They're moving up into the sky rather than outward into green space. And, that's the way to go. Dense cities are more efficient cities and a little bit safer. Sprawl is a big problem, and we have to really be careful about gobbling up green space and wetland.
One of the other things that might be unique to Texas and Houston is that the building codes in Texas are voluntary unless a local town or municipality adopts a code and enforces it. So it's kind of it's an odd situation to think of building codes as being not mandatory.
It really gets me in the United States, the richest country in the world. They do this sort of thing, and sometimes we complain about building code in Canada, but we have a pretty darn good code. It could be better, but it is mandatory here. And Texas has one of the poorest codes in the U.S. Out of 18 coastal states, their building code ranks very, very low. 18 out of 100 at one point, 36 out of 100 in another study. So not very prepared for this type of thing, that's for sure.
When you look at something like this, do you get any sense of how long it's going to be for those folks to recover? Some will obviously recover, sooner than others. But how long is this going to take?
This will take years, and I'm not kidding. We've seen storms in the past where FEMA blue tarps have been on roofs for years after an event, and New Orleans is still recovering from Katrina, 2005. This is going to take a long, long time, and even some places will be uninhabitable for months going forward.
Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for joining our program.
Thank you.
Glenn McGillivray, Managing Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, based in Toronto.